Hope everybody had a good lunch and had an opportunity to talk to some folks that they may not have known. I know I saw a lot of connections that were being made that, people who know each other, people who heard of each other, but I think also that people are really happy to get to know each other. So again, if you're on Twitter, the live stream is at immigration2020.org. The hashtag is hashtag immigration2020. It's pretty self-explanatory that way. So our next panel is Securing America's Success. And, I just have to say that, this is just a really, really exciting panel for us as an organization because we have some folks who have just made an incredible contribution to the country, an incredible contribution to the city, and who continue to do just amazing, amazing work. So before I tee that up, I know we have another survey question that we just wanted to talk about here. And the question here was, what are the best ways to engage your community in a conversation about how America thrives when new Americans have the opportunities, skills, and status to reach their fullest potential? And you'll see here that there are a range of events or tactics that people chose. Now, this slide is important because, remember at the beginning of the day, we talked about the 3 next steps for this conversation. The first step being defining the agenda. The second step being telling the story. And the third step being impacting policy. So this starts to put some meat on the bones of, okay, how do we do that? Is it roundtables with different constituencies? Is it outreach in churches? But the work moving forward is going to involve you. Again, defining the agenda, telling the story, and impacting policy. And a lot of folks came up to me and said, why are we talking about 2020? It's, well, immigration is not just about the next month, not the next 6 months, not one piece of legislation or one executive action. It's really about where we're going as a country. So this next panel is really about what, and the leaders that are speaking are working on this question and addressing this question in incredible ways. Richard Louie is going to be our moderator from MSNBC. He's been a great, not only a great person to have at MSNBC, but Juan Williams was telling me that he and Juan have actually worked on having dialogues at the museum around race and culture. So we're just really, really thrilled to have you today, Richard, and thank you for joining us. And then, Donald Graham, who I got to say I did a bit of a happy dance when I heard that Mr. Graham was going to join us today. He is not only just a person who's contributed so much to the city of Washington and the life of Washington, D.C., but I think really to the country at large. James Gill, who's done great work in the veterans community and the business community. Wendy Kallergis, who yesterday was honored at the White House as a champion of change. And then Egbert Perry, an incredible person we just met recently who is in Atlanta, and he himself is an immigrant from Antigua. So I think I just stole all of Richard's thunder. But I really want to thank Richard, and I'm going to turn it over to him right now. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Ali. Thank you so much. Yeah, he did steal all my thunder. Not that I got a lot of thunder, but we'll see in the next hour. I'm really looking forward to this conversation as well as we look at the economic impact that immigration can have on our country and the small towns and big towns and small states and big states across the country. And as was said, we're going to start off with a very impactful message from Donald Graham, CEO and chairman of Graham Holdings. And as you know, back in 1991, in May 91 when he joined, that was then the Washington Post company. And he is so well known in the city and around the country and in my business and Juan's business as journalists and Rick's business. We have come to know his name throughout what we do day in and day out and throughout our education, what we do here in D.C. and around the country. So please, a warm welcome for Don Graham.
Thank you, Richard. Increasingly, standing up to address groups like this, I feel a little old. And today I walked into the green room and ran into Juan Williams. And Juan looks great. I mean, even with that bright blue suit, he looks great. But I we began talking, and I said, you know, I met you when you were a junior in college. And I said, what year was that? He said, 1975. He was a summer intern at the Washington Post, was a hell of a reporter, came back the next year, and that's where he started his career. Juan had a long-time newspaper career before he became this very famous broadcaster. I am so impressed that there is a group like this. I'm so impressed to meet Ali. And standing up here, I realize I know the least about immigration issues of anyone in this room. But here's what I think I'm the good news part of this conference, but I need your help badly. And you'll see that I'm not making this up. For the last 18 months, two people you know better than you know me, Henry Munoz and Carlos Gutierrez, yes, a Democrat and a Republican. This violates several principles of life here in Washington, but bear with me. The three of us began working almost exactly 1 year ago on making a tiny chink in one of the great wrongs in this country. I've worked for 15 years as the chairman of a scholarship program in the DC public schools. We've had a tremendous impact on college attendance rates among public and charter school graduates in Washington. It wasn't hard because it was so low in the first place. But our president for the whole of the last 15 years is a woman named Argelia Rodriguez, who is a Cuban immigrant. And Argelia told me in 2002, I think, that there were two students who could not go to college because although they graduated from DC public schools, they were not US citizens. We think the number this year is 75. Washington is not a center of immigration, quite the opposite. Most of the jobs here are government jobs, so the immigrant communities are more in Virginia and Maryland than in DC. But I was suddenly aware that the number of dreamers, the number of immigrants, undocumented immigrant children graduating from our public schools was getting to be enough that it was holding, here was a large group of kids for whom this opportunity we believed so strongly in was not on offer. So at that point I met Henry, who is a force of nature, as some of you know, because Henry's very good at reaching into the pockets of his friends. He's the finance chair of the Democratic National Committee, so I need not say more. And Henry and Carlos and I began to ask each other, is there any point in our trying to set up a national scholarship fund for dreamers? We started this at an organizational meeting last June 30th. We now have a staff of 2, and that's where I met one of our staff of 2, whom half the room knows, a woman named Gabby Pacheco, who is absolutely, I know a lot of great people. Gabby Pacheco is as great as any person I've ever met in my life. She is a dreamer who was admitted to Miami-Dade College on her 27th visit to the admissions office, graduated from there with 3 degrees in education, and instead of getting a job, decided to walk from Miami to Washington with 3 of her classmates, many of you know the story, to protest the educational plight of the dreamers. At 29, Gabby is collecting Lifetime Achievement Awards for her civil rights work, and she deserves every one of them. So Gabby, Henry, and I met for the first time last June 30th. We set up the organization in September. The staff consists of Candy Marshall, who's an ex-Gates Foundation lawyer, and Gabby. We decided that we were going to be crazy enough to try to raise scholarship money that we could pay the full tuition for DACA-eligible Dreamer students. We would pay the full tuition, and believe it or not, there are such places, to good colleges where Dreamers can get a degree for $25,000. That's the tuition at Miami-Dade, if you're in-state. It's the tuition at the City University of New York, if you're in-state. And we decided to make partnerships with certain colleges to ask that those colleges provide counseling assistance to the Dreamers. By accident, we kind of backed into having posses. And we started in the states where there were the most dreamers. 6 Texas universities, UTs, North Texas State in Dallas, University of Houston are now our partners, El Paso, UT El Paso and UP Pan American. In California, Cal State Long Beach was our first partner. Cal State San Bernardino is now a partner, and UC Santa Cruz is our first partner. In Northern California, we also have many community college partners in those states. Folks, we have raised $33 million. That sounds like all the money in the world. This room does math pretty well. 33 million divided by 25,000 is about 1,300 students. There are 600,000 students who've received DACA. We are going to go crazy trying to raise money and offer scholarships to as many of those students as we can. We got colleges beating down the door to partner with us, but we're insisting on our price point. There are good colleges like, Miami-Dade. I think many of you know Dr. Eduardo Padron, who is, if there were a man like that in Washington, D.C., it'd be a different city. 176,000 students at Miami-Dade, the biggest university in the United States. And it's all because of him. But, we think that what is being done to dreamers around this country is ghastly. And we think we can do something about it. It will be no surprise to you that many of our students are 21, 22, 23 years old. They've been waiting that long for a chance to go to college. We sat Monday night in New York trying to raise money, as usual, with a student named Araceli Mendez, who has been working for the last 3 years as a janitor, but wants to be a pediatric nurse. She's now a member of Phi Beta Kappa 1 year into her college career. And this kind of potential exists all over the country. How did we get to $33 million? Well, it helps that 2 early donors to this program were named Bill and Melinda. I'm not allowed to say how much they gave, but they gave. And what they said to me at the time we solicited the grant was, we have been looking for somebody to lead an effort related to the Dreamers because the motivation among them is so strong. And I'm here to tell you. Okay, our organization is called thedream.us, THEDREAM.us. The reason I mention it is this. I know there are people in this room who are closely connected with Dreamers or who are closely connected with high schools. In the regions in which we have partner colleges, which is California, Florida, Texas, New York, and Washington, D.C., and other places, we are open for applications for scholarships now, but I mean really for the next week. The application takes work. It's reviewed by a panel of 7 very tough judges, of whom I'm not one. The judges are educators. And we want as many applicants as possible because, we think we know that most Dreamer students still think there's no way they can afford to go to college. And that's one of the barriers we have to break down. On our first round, we've already awarded about 310 scholarships. We have that many students in college. This time, we hope to award another couple of hundred, and in February, we'll be back with another round. We are wide open for ideas, for advice, for counsel, and oh my God, are we wide open if you know anybody who will support us. Our company, Graham Holdings, is paying the 2-person staff of the Dream.us, so every dollar contributed to us goes straight to scholarships. And we don't have any other program. All we're offering is tuition money, although everybody and their brother says, well, that's not enough. But the Dreamers say that's what they need. So it is a joy to be able to tell you about this. I'm so grateful to Ollie for inviting me. I am wide open to your ideas. I'm part of the panel, so we'll be kicking this around. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you, Don, and I'd like to welcome up the rest of our panelists right now.
think I'm down.
Here, correct.
Yes.
So as Ollie mentioned earlier, we have the pleasure on our panel as we discuss the economic impact of immigration in the United States. Directly to my left here, we have James Gill, president of TMG Government. We have Wendy Kallergis, president and CEO at the Greater Miami and the Beaches Hotel Association. Egbert Perry, chairman and chief executive officer of Integral, and Don Graham, who just gave us a great way to start kicking this off. And so I'll start directly to my left. And first of all, in the 30 minutes that we've got before they cut us off, I just want to make sure all of you argue as much as you can. All right? Don't wait for my questions. If you want to dig in, go for it. It's something that I definitely encourage when I'm on air. Makes better TV, right? So let's start with you then, if I can here. Jim,
Sure.
The idea of what don't we know? What have we not heard? What is something that you can tell us that we don't already know when considering the economics related to immigration and immigrants? What haven't we heard?
I think the potential. I think Mr. Graham talked about it. You know, I recently read the CBO independent study that said just the passing of the Senate bill as it is now would create by 2023 a 3.5% increase in GDP. And by 2030, a 5.4 GDP increase. In real dollars, that's about $750 billion to $1.4 trillion just by streamlining the process and creating certainty in uncertain apparatus. So I think that's what we don't know, that facts bear out the true potential of immigrants promoting the ideas of entrepreneurship, innovation to increase our workforce productivity. That's what I'm focused on, carrying that message to get people to understand that equation.
Okay, so the 3.5% savings of $175 billion over the next 10 years. Wendy, what don't we know when we're considering this idea that we're talking about today?
I just think that I'd like to share with you some numbers of our travel and tourism industry because so many of our employees are eligible for new American citizenship. And by 2016, there will be 3.3 million hospitality jobs in the United States. U.S. jobs that depend on travel and tourism, 1 out of 9. And travel is among the top 10 industries in 49 states and D.C. for employment. This fact I just found out the other day, and by the way, this information I got from the U.S. Travel Association. Each U.S. household would pay $1,093 more in taxes without the tax revenue generated by tourism. So it's very exciting, and the opportunity that we have with the new American workforce and what we're doing with the new American citizenship it's blowing us away. It's incredible.
Egbert?
I will give you, actually allow me to start the argument by just ignoring your question and just saying what.
Well, it's already happens all the time.
No, I've always said, Richard, there's nothing more productive than a person who is extremely motivated to succeed, whether it's out of pure fear of failure or fear of embarrassing their family. And I think that the immigrant has those attributes in greater supply than people who are native or have arrived. And so I will look in my own personal circumstances, and where you come from drives what your immigration experience is. And I mean that in the sense of, I'm from the Caribbean. If you finish high school in the English-speaking Caribbean, there is nowhere to go other than perhaps University of the West Indies, which takes a couple of thousand students a year. So all of the Caribbean suffers from this brain drain where you go to either the US, the UK, or Canada. And so those countries, in effect, benefit from the immigrant going abroad. And I can tell you, even as a grown man today, my biggest fear is if I do something, or my mother and father are deceased, but I still think, oh boy, if mommy knew that I did that.
Yeah.
So the immigrant is heavily motivated to be productive because they realize that there was a contribution or a sacrifice made by someone back home to give them an opportunity. And I think that's a big driver. Later I could talk about how we in this country do a lot to undermine the very thing that helps to contribute tremendously to the growth of the country.
Don?
I want to ask Jim in particular. I thought what all three panelists said is fascinating. Jim, you are participating in this as a veteran and as somebody that's deeply interested in the lives of veterans. Relate that issue to immigration.
So I appreciate your comments, Mr. Graham, about the Dreamers. I mean, we've done a lot of work. You know, my last 5 years in the Army, I was in the Army Recruiting Command. So our charter is to go out and recruit America's youth to serve our nation in various military occupational skills. This idea of MAVNI and the military accessions of vital national interest is controversial only because of the spin that's being put on it. This is something new. You're recruiting foreign-born nationals and immigrants into the military. Really? I think my old mentor, General Taguba, talked this morning about his father. If we look at our history, Baron von Steuben, a German immigrant who was really a mercenary, trained General Washington's Continental Army and created a non-commissioned officer corps, the framework that we were built upon. Irish brigades fighting for the Union in the Civil War, who were repatriated and given a chance to serve and become citizens. As a recruiter in our cities, in my region, running into foreign-born individuals who wanted to serve their country, but they were not documented. So a recruiter would hold them by the hand, take them to INS, bring them out of the shadows, walk them through the process, give them a green card, and they go.
Jim,
It's a pathway to legalization.
Lafayette Square around the
Right.
corner is across the street from the White House. The four corners of Lafayette Square have statues of foreigners, immigrants who fought in our Revolutionary War on our side, starting with Lafayette.
That's right.
I'm an Army veteran too, though. In my case, it wasn't my idea. It was, you who are younger than Juan may need to know there was once something called a draft.
Juan's getting a lot of play today.
Yeah, he is.
It pays to be old.
I'm here to give him a hard time, Richard.
And I'm not going to wear a blue suit around you, put it that way. I did want to ask this because, as you know, throughout today's forum, we've been talking about the live questions, and I want to put this out to all of you, if you can participate and tell us what you think. And we're doing this live poll. I want you to take a look at the screens and take out your phone and, as been said earlier, your tablet or laptop, and you can go to pollev.com /12020 and select your response to this current question. It's going to pop up shortly, I think. What term do you most associate with immigrants? And right now we have one word in, that's faithful. You can also text your idea, whether you're here or you're watching the live stream, opportunity. You can text that to 22333. 22333. Wendy, as we look at the debate over immigration and the workforce and the issues related to that, it's focused on high-skilled STEM, right? That's what we've been talking about, workers and lower-skilled agricultural workers. How do immigrants contribute to the service and hospitality industry? You gave me some numbers earlier, but put some meat on those bones.
Well, yeah, we have over 100,000 employees in the hospitality industry in Miami-Dade County, and those numbers will double over the next 5 to 10 years. Most of our employees, in particular the hourly employees, are eligible for new American citizenship, and their parents as well. It's very, very interesting. So our interest is exploding as far as with the new American workforce. It's so simple. We were actually introduced to the program at Miami-Dade College. Dr. Padron introduced it to us over a year and a half ago, and he was introducing it to his employees. And I appreciate very much, Mr. Graham, the words you said about Dr. Padron, because you're absolutely true that the work that he does is amazing for our kids, and it's fabulous. So we were there with HR directors, from our hotels, and we were looking for flaws in this program. We were looking, how can this be so easy? And so it's incredible, and it's so commonsensical. We have now a couple hundred employees that have already become citizens in Miami. So it's going to be such great opportunity for our hourly employees. A lot of them are maids or bellmen or cooks, and they're going to develop such self-confidence to become supervisors. I can see the first employee who received it from the Intercontinental Miami, Raquel, who was with us yesterday at the White House. And she's going to be a general manager. Is Raquel here? Raquel's here, no?
See it in her
yeah, hi,
eyes,
Raquel.
right?
She's going to be a general manager. You're going to be a general manager one day.
She's going to take over your job.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you're going to have my job too.
That's what's happening. You're grooming her right now as we
That's
speak.
right.
So Egbert, you know, in your work here with Fannie Mae, and you've got a lot of responsibility there, as well as the Board of Trustees at the University of Pennsylvania. But let's talk about your understanding of finance and the economics behind immigrants. And when we look at your experience so far, you've seen some highs and lows recently when it comes to housing and what that relates to in terms of immigrants.
Yes, and you know, that's a very important part of what drives. We look at our economy, and the fact is housing plays such a major form of wealth and stability for families. And there's a saying that 70% of all wealth transferred in this country is through the form of home ownership. A lot of immigrants are unable to take advantage of that. Either they're in the shadows and therefore not trusting of a system that causes them to have to come out and expose all of their personal information. So a part of one of the things we did, and Jonathan Plutzik is on the board at Fannie with me. We have an unenviable job. But we created something called Access to Credit and Affordable Housing, and it's specifically designed to expand the number of people that are filling inside the credit box. So if one of the casualties of the last 5 years with the crisis is that only people who are at the high FICO score and low loan-to-value ratios were getting loans. Not because we didn't have a bigger credit box, but a lot of people on the lower FICO scores, higher loan-to-values, but still within our credit box, didn't think they should apply or didn't think that the doors were open to them. A lot of those are immigrants. A lot of those are minorities and a lot of immigrants. And so we're consciously trying to see if we can change that dynamic because it's a way for immigrants to build wealth.
How do they drive the housing market?
Well, you know, the thing is immigrants tend to, especially certain immigrants, tend to be very much focused on home ownership. It's the pride of defining success when you leave abroad and land in this country. One of the big symbols of achievement is, I now own a home. And it becomes a rallying location for everyone in the family, in the extended family, when they come to visit. So I can speak from personal experience as first-generation immigrant, but I see it throughout the community. People, you come from overseas to visit, and you're going to such and such's house. And it becomes more than just a wealth issue. It's a place where you unify the family in foreign territory. And so it's very important.
I have arrived.
It's really amazing. You know, we're here at the Ronald Reagan Center in Washington, D.C., 13th and Pennsylvania Avenue. You walk out the door when you leave this evening, you look to your right, you'll see the Capitol, you look to your left, you'll see the White House. And I got a feeling that throughout this room, there is a very strong attachment to this country, a very strong belief in it, a very strong love of this country. And yet, you know, we are missing so much opportunity as a country. Immigration, I don't think there's an American who feels that immigration policy as it's currently existing makes any sense at all. And yet, we stare at it for years and we can't address it. To Richard's question, the world is now full of examples of what your economy looks like, what your country looks like if your population is shrinking. A lot of populations are shrinking very fast. Those are countries like Russia. Oh my God, you do not want to. You don't want to have your life at stake on the future GDP of Russia, with population just falling like a stone. Japan,
Right.
big problems,
example.
full of 65-year-olds, nobody to pay their pensions.
Yeah.
In this country, where does growth come from? It comes from immigration, period. And
So Don, is that what drove you to invest in Dreamers? I'm interested in what brought you into it and why you believe your investment moving forward
oh, Richard,
has something to do with economics.
It's just an outrage.
Yeah.
I wanted to get into it because I wanted to get into it after 15, I'm still deeply involved in this scholarship fund for all the public and charter school children in Washington, D.C. I've lived here all my life. This is a city where the public school kids are very, very low income. And you look at these dreamers, you look at the difference a college education makes, and you know the numbers. It's twice the income over a lifetime. Then you look at the dreamers, and you say, how crazy is this? You've got this population of people who are knocking the doors down, who are dying to go to college, who want an education so they can get a job. And there's a marvelous documentary that I saw last week called Underwater Dreams. Has everybody seen it? It's the story of this team from four undocumented kids from a high school in Phoenix enter a competition to build a robot in 2004, 10 years ago, and they win, although one of the competitors is from MIT. Well, this genius of a documentary maker 10 years later, got the kids from Phoenix and the kids from MIT back together. At the very end of the movie, they go around the room. The kids from MIT are asked, where are you working? Apple, Google, NASA. The Dreamer kids are asked where they're working. I'm a janitor, I'm a cook, I'm working for my friend who's the cook. The big success story is a staff sergeant in the Army, but he became a citizen. And what was the difference? College. The Dreamer kids got no chance to go to college. Why? Well, they live in Arizona, for one thing. No, I mean, that place, I presume everybody knows that Arizona took the driver's licenses away from them.
Haven't heard about it.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, I mean, that documentary alone just says everything.
Can I,
Please.
Go ahead.
I think Mr. Graham brings up a great point. I mean, Mr. Graham and I come from a very different approach in our politics. But I think the conversation we're having here today, I think maybe I'll take a poll because it is idiotic. And I got engaged because I was tired of the stupid on the margins.
Yeah.
I look at this as a national opportunity. And as a business owner and as a veteran, how can we increase productivity of our economy? How can we compete in a new century? So, everyone in this room understands the opportunity, I believe, or you wouldn't be here. So, show of hands, who has not in this room traveled outside the United States? How many people has lived outside the United States in this room? That's the difference. So this is a cultural problem, and it is driven by the margins of loud voices on the extremes. And until we take this conversation over and have these type of discussions, it will continue to be driven that way. So policy, good policy, I think this morning's panel said it right. Policy is settled on this, the debate. Economically, the numbers we spewed. Now the challenge is, do we have a leader or leaders, or do we have a group of people that can take this and champion it across the finish line? To your point about the Dreamers, that's where I'm focused. Being from Florida, us too, and your involvement is I'm very close to a family that is supporting that documentary. It's involved in that. And I believe, you're talking about the estimates about 1.2 or 2 million kids that grew up here, 21 years of, all they know, appropriately named Dreamers, is the American dream. And not to give those people an opportunity to serve,
It's crazy.
to get an education, to be part of a productive workforce is morally reprehensible to me.
It's just bad business and common sense as well.
Yes,
I'll give you another example, and I was fortunate I got into the track early, but I graduated after 7 years at a university, and was an engineering, accounting, and finance degree, so overeducated idiot. And I
Sound
went...
like kind of a boring guy, too. Engineering, accountant.
Fact.
No.
So I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I just
You
was going to
clearly
stay in school
turned the
forever.
corner, though.
Finance.
He turned the corner.
But I my mother had filed a petition for permanent residence for me because my oldest brother had applied for her. She had filed for me. I was on a student visa. I was applying for practical training visa. And I went to the office in Philadelphia and in New York to make sure that if I turned in my student visa for my practical training visa, that it would be seamless. I would not have my time here interrupted. I got affirmative from both. I turned in my student visa, and 2 weeks later, I got a deportation notice.
Wow.
Now, Ali, where's Ali? I said I wouldn't do it, but I'm going to do it. So
Do it. Whatever it is, he's
so
going to do it now.
I got my deportation notice, and I skipped town, disappeared, got a job in D.C., was illegal, so I was an illegal immigrant, and I use the term illegal because that's what I was called. Went to Atlanta, I was illegal. So Ali said, it doesn't sound good for the chairman of the board of Fannie Mae to have been an illegal immigrant. But I was.
What a
and
story,
it made
though. Yeah.
absolutely no sense. And I think of it, in the very same year, I had applied for an American Express card.
Right.
And they rejected me on the basis that I had no credit history. And I wrote this very long, page-and-a-half letter to the CEO, I'm sure he never saw it, and told him how asinine I thought that was, that somebody had gotten educated,
Right.
was going to have a decent job,
Right.
and couldn't get a credit card, so what's the point? And about a month later, an American Express credit card showed up in the mail.
Oh.
So sometimes the system is, you have to do it in spite of the system, and the system is just built on stupid.
Yeah.
And you have to overcome that. So.
But Egbert, isn't your story, I mean, we all understand this in the room, the American story?
Oh, I think so, because I think whether it's how you get in or once you're in, what you experience, everyone has a story, and I don't think mine is particularly any different. I'm number 9 of 11 kids.
Right.
My father and mother made $2,500 EC a year,
Yeah.
Eastern Caribbean currency, which is about $1,000 US, and all of their kids went to college.
Right.
But we all knew it was an expectation, and as I said earlier, when I left home, I knew if I got in trouble, my mother was going to beat the hell out of me if she found out, and I was living in fear of doing something that would disappoint them.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's unusual.
If I close my eyes, I would think that you're Asian, based on what you decided to study and your whole family structure. I mean, the number 13 or whatever the case may be. But it does bring to mind, for me at least, my grandparents. Both of them were illegal immigrants, but they were entrepreneurs. My grandfather opened a barbershop. And it's because of that barbershop, he was able to bring home a fish every week to feed the entire family. But they were illegal just as you were, and they went through that process, and then they became legal. The idea here that we talk about, creating businesses, running businesses, entrepreneurs, the H-1B visa has been obviously batted around in Silicon Valley for many a year. We're now hitting one of those peak points because if you talk to anybody in the Valley, they can't find anything.
Right.
And you were hitting on this just a second ago. We have these highly trained immigrants. Some may want to stay, some may not. To the panel, give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I'll jump in first. I've worked in Silicon Valley in 2 previous companies in Mountain View and Sunnyvale, and also investing in a couple of startups. The conversation around the visa program is the cap. Have we done an appropriate workforce analysis projecting out to 2030 of what our workforce needs to look at by industry, and from there back channel an old military paradigm, crosswalk to your requirements and capabilities? No, we have not.
Yep.
Right? So how can we project what type of visas that we need by job classification codes? And this is not just in the high-tech area, PhDs, tech, code writers, C#, all that kind of stuff. Is also something that I watched Ollie talked about, is we don't want to create a divide between highly educated and marginally skilled workforce. We need to look at the holistic view of the workforce and not have gaps in that workforce in the labor market. Because if we do it the correct way and do some forecasting and an intelligent design of what the 2030 workforce looks like, then businesses can plan accordingly, and then we can recruit accordingly. Drifting a little off the subject, I read a unique report sponsored by Richard Haas's organization, Council on Foreign Relations. Mm-hmm. And Richard chartered Robert Zoellick, the former president of the World Bank, and General Dave Petraeus, an old mentor of mine, to look at North America holistically and North America's strategy. And why can't we think outside the box to say, let's create a trilateral strategic plan or vision for our continent? Not giving up our sovereign borders and border security of 3 independent nations, but let's plan 2030 of what workforce do we need, how do we increase the fluidity and mobility of that workforce, and maybe we take less focus off of citizenship and non-citizenship and focus on the TN visas created under the NAFTA program. Look at the H-1B visas and map that to our workforce analysis and create a mobility accord to move people, human capital, to get into our service industry and our high-tech industry. I think that's the approach we need to look in a strategic vision. And if we could find a leader that could articulate that, I think there'd be a lot of us that would follow that person.
Yeah, deploy resource not only geographically or via industry, but also cyclically. When you think about the cyclicality of our economy, that also exists geographically. I have another question for those of you here and those who might be watching us on the stream. If you can do this for us, write down your question right now, because we're going to go to Q&A in about 5 or 10 minutes. And you can pass it along to our helpers here, and we will definitely get that to them if we can. We also have another live poll. You can take a look at the screens right now, and as was mentioned before, you can go to pollev.com/12020. You can select your response to this current question: how do immigrants most contribute to our economic success? You have innovative ideas, diversity of experience, entrepreneurial spirit. Look at that. That one's already in there. And work ethic, ethic 2020. We should have like a prize for the first vote in, because that was fast. Yeah. I barely even finished reading this. Wendy, as they're doing that, why should businesses, what's the argument you might make to those, and you have a lot of experience in food and beverage, but to all businesses, what's the message that's so important as to why they should care about immigrants?
I mean, it's to be American, I think. It really, one of the things I've been struggling with the last couple days is, why aren't our corporate, well, it's actually my challenge to myself, is to get our corporate hotel offices to engage in this program. Because if we get all of our corporations, we're working with, Marriott in DC, we're working with Marriott in Miami, Hyatt in Miami, but all we need to, if we can get to the corporate offices, think of how fast we're going to have more new American citizens. And I'm thinking about the scholarship, because our industry loves scholarship. We love raising money for scholarships. And, maybe the employers can, when we have one of our employees become a citizen, maybe we contribute $5. I'm just thinking, like $5 for each new American citizen toward the scholarship program. Think of the amount of money that we can raise for that. I just, there's so much satisfaction, out of this.
We're going to stay cheap.
We're always going to need scholarship money. We are always going to need scholarship money.
Before we go to the questions and answers, really quickly to our panel, and anybody wants to talk about this, how does, when we look at immigration reform, how does that reduce unemployment? Because the argument often is that it is, going to instead increase unemployment, but how does it reduce unemployment?
So, I think you can tell I'm a numbers guy, right? I'm a numbers guy. So we've been averaging, I think last quarter to quarter before last, 178,000, 212,000 new jobs, right? There's 1.3 million job vacancies. So me, sitting around thinking, well, that leads me to 3 conclusions. 1, nobody wants to work. I refute that argument holistically as an average of our demographics. 2 is we don't have a skilled workforce to meet the job demands that businesses are laying out. That's what I tend to believe as a business guy. So why don't we address the educational reform needed in our school system? Let's get the people that, no fault of their own, are not part of a productive workforce because they have no path to be productive, right? And they're not part of the education system. So we're like a Corvette, a great American car. 8-cylinder, big engine running on 2 cylinders because we're not engaging the other cylinders. So I think, Richard, to answer your question, the policy and the need for this has been decided. It is, how do we overcome the negative message that appeals to people's fear about what this means? In a scary world, a very complex security environment, it's scary to some people that's not exposed to different cultures. So I think the more we can expose people to the value of this, my experience, 21 years in the Army, coming from a very conservative district, married to an immigrant, I appreciate your point about the undocumented process, but just as asinine is the legal process. Mm-hmm. Right? So here's my young bride. We married when we were 21, she was 22. We were in Germany, our first tour duty, and then I deployed numerous times. She's a devoted military spouse, served 21 years beside my side, was a green card holder when we first got married, and go through the process that I watched her go through to become a citizen. Someone's devoted 20 years of her life to go through this process of, a long line and being humiliated. And I can't tell you the arguments I got in with people in the immigration service when she went through as a legal resident.
Right.
I can imagine undocumented people go in the humiliation they go through in the way they're treated.
If they don't have an advocate like you, right.
If they don't have an advocate like me.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about that in general, that, our system from a business guy needs a really lean Six Sigma approach holistically and map to a strategy, to answer your question.
You asked your question about reducing unemployment. Look at him.
Yeah.
Here's a guy with the capability of creating a business that employs a lot of other people, and they want to throw him out.
Right.
I'm on the board of directors of Facebook, so I spend time out in California. I met 2 guys. They didn't want their story told, so I didn't, but they founded a company with 150 employees in the United States. They were undocumented immigrants. Mm-hmm. And the government came to them and they said, well, here's what we're doing. And they said, well, if you want to throw us out, we'll take the jobs back to India.
Right. And that's what's happening.
So tell us about the discussion that as you're sitting there with the board, and when you're thinking of...
Mark Zuckerberg, I think everybody in this room knows Mark has spent more time on the issue of immigration than anything else in United States policy. He is fervently in favor of across-the-board change in immigration policy, not just about highly skilled visas for people in Silicon Valley.
Soup to nuts.
That's where he started. But Mark also is married to Priscilla Chan, who's now a pediatrician, but was an elementary school teacher in East Palo Alto, and introduced Mark to kids who were undocumented immigrants and woke him up to the issue of dreamers. So he is a vigorous advocate of across-the-board immigration.
Good points made there. Finish this off before.
And I have several friends. I play a lot of soccer.
Yeah.
At least I'm on the soccer field a lot. Some would argue that I don't play as much anymore.
You're observer?
Yes, I'm an observer on the field. But I have friends who, 2 guys, they are highly trained in computer science. One is a PhD. Another one is in math and science.
You got to get outside the circle.
No, it's actually, I cover the spectrum, believe me. But these guys they're spending their time career-wise driving taxis because they're illegal, and what happened to me happened to them, and they never got over that hump. So here we are, to your point, Jim, we have positions to fill.
Right.
Yeah.
But our immigration policy takes people that were educated here. They've been in the country for 20-something years.
Yeah.
And they are basically doing jobs to stay under the radar because our immigration policy is so messed up. Now think about that.
And as important, I worked in the Valley in Mountain View, just down the street from Facebook, and we had engineers, systems engineers, coders, working for our company, rolling out new products, R&D, and engineer process. And because of the visa caps, because of the system, those people got great American business acumen, created a network of investors and followers, went back to their home country, started their own business, and brought to market a year later competitive products and deleted our market share. That just makes no good economic sense.
One point is, I have to argue with you. I don't think that the United States economy is a Corvette. It's a Corvette ZR1, which is a 10-cylinder engine car. So
There you go.
yeah, there you go. I like that one.
You're
All right,
exactly right.
to one of our questions here, one of our statements, and just get reactions from you guys. Do not equalize skills with education. I'm reading verbatim here. We have many skilled workers in agriculture and need more. To the panel.
I'll say on that. My day job is I have a real estate development company. Anybody that does real estate knows that 75% of your budget is construction.
Yeah.
And because of our policies, we are suffering in the industry from a shortage of skilled labor in the construction workforce.
Yeah.
Everybody left. I mean, I don't think it was self-deportation, but everybody left. And the policies are so hostile that even in the trades, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So the end result is cost of living is escalating because we don't have the workforce in supply to support the industry. And as a result, we're hurting ourselves. And we don't even do that kind of counting.
Yeah. I think it's very important that we don't focus either, I think that was a great fact that was pointed out.
Right.
Education is education. Skills, competencies, trade is another component. And we can't, confuse those two buckets, and we can't devalue one or the other. I think the real value here is, to your point about certain markets, that we need to do an analysis of the skills. Let's look at, I was talking about this North American Accord. Mexico is going through an economic boom right now in manufacturing. So they're producing stuff,
That's right.
right? Yeah. They're producing stuff for American businesses. They're generating profits off of that production engine. We, very quickly are not producing widgets. We're producing ideas. We're producing a marketplace because of innovation. We need to focus on, what skills do we need, as well as what education reform we need to get everybody part of this new Corvette you're talking about.
That's right.
I don't think that is being focused on enough.
Anybody else?
Richard, let me give you one provocative comment. Our failed educational system in K-12, especially in urban areas, is producing at a very alarming rate, a supply of individuals that don't have have not met the educational threshold or the skill threshold. So we're growing that segment of the population. But the jobs that those people could do
Right.
are not here anymore.
Right.
So we're creating our own social crisis in this country, and those dots, to
Right.
me, are the most important dots to connect.
And while we cannot separate the two topics, and education within itself would be another panel, no doubt, is the cyclicality of our entire economy and how it's adjusted in its educational system, which is, I'm sure, been talked about many an hour so far today. I'll go to this other question and comment. It says, will the Tea Party need to be convinced of need for reform if change is going to happen, or can the loud minority be overwhelmed? Please.
Why don't you answer
Don't all
that,
jump
Richard?
in at once. All right, there you go, Don. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Wait, I'm referring the question back to you.
You're referring it
you're
back
the
to me,
political
yeah.
expert here.
Anybody? All right. How about you, Wendy?
I don't have a comment on that.
No comment on that?
I'm only hesitant because I was looking at some of the comments, and it's already out there that the chairman of Fannie Mae was illegal.
Wasn't that great? I love that.
I'm sure my wife will have a few comments.
I mean, let's focus on the latter part of this, whoever did ask this question, and that is really the volume that the group that is so concentrated as we discuss on immigration reform. It seems to be, and I think this is what the commenter is saying, it seems to be a minority, but I think so far in this panel we are saying, and you are saying, that it is not a minority. That is across many parts of our economy, many parts of our political spectrum, many parts of America that don't believe that it is a minority idea, that it is an idea that's in the minority. And that's what this question, I think, is really driven at. Yet, despite that perhaps reality, it's not getting through, right? And let me take this to a question I'm very interested in, and that is, what will drive a portion or CRR in its entirety? Will it be the ebb and flow of our economy? Is it that we may see this if the economy increases to such a point that we will see something happen in D.C.?
I don't know if it's the ebb and flow, but I do believe that the complex global economic and security environment is forcing us to confront realities that our political system for years hasn't had to confront. Mm-hmm. And that is, you know, we are right now fighting an enemy that's evolved over the last few years. Our military has to face an very complex and uncertain. The only thing certain right now in our force is uncertainty. We don't know where the next crisis is going to be. You know, what we're trying to promote in the military is adaptability, versatility, and resilience among our force. I think that could be the same thing for our political leaders. Can you adapt? And I think, you know, I'm a big proponent of looking at our congressional districts and seeing how this issue impacts the people living in that district. I think what we get on the margins is a minority view that's perpetrated by a loud megaphone, either on talk radio or on TV, but the consensus of people, if you poll them, agree with the topics we're talking about today. I think the message has been distorted, and someone has to take control of the narrative.
So I grew up in D.C., and I was born in 1945, and one of the great public servants in Washington when I was a kid was Dean Acheson, who was Secretary of State in the Truman administration. He told my mother once that he had an inbox and an outbox on his desk, and he had another box that was labeled "too hard."
Yeah.
And undoing gridlock in Washington is in my too hard pile. I just want to educate kids who want an education and can benefit themselves and benefit the whole country by it. We'll solve gridlock in this town one day. I think it's a matter of leadership and leadership from more than one person.
Exactly.
But there is going to be a meantime. This isn't going to the needed change that was framed in your question isn't going to happen tomorrow.
We've got to finish up our panel, although I'd love to talk longer, but I'm going to finish with a bit of a lightning round. And I can say as many words as I want, and you only can say one word.
Okay.
All right? And that's just to kind of get through a lot of these issues. I always find this very interesting. And I want to start with, again, what Ali started today with, as he was talking about definition, about telling, and about impact. And this is with regard to immigration and immigration reform and immigration policy. And to all of you, I will ask you to just react to each one of these words. So when we talk about the economic impact or the definition of immigration reform, what's the one word that comes to mind for you?
Productivity.
Happiness.
Wealth.
Opportunity.
Telling the story of immigration reform. Wendy?
Wanting to. I can only do one word.
There's a dash there. Don?
People.
People. Egbert?
Awareness.
Passionate.
Impact of immigration reform.
Unquantifiable.
Unquantifiable.
Exciting.
Don?
Same word a lot of you use, patriotic. Good for the country.
Lots of dashes.
Excessive.
H-1B.
H-1B. Which one was that again?
That's to you. Skilled workers.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay. Oh, to me?
Yeah.
A solution.
Yeah.
Wendy?
Necessity.
Restrictive.
Now.
A number that you absolutely want us to remember when we leave about our topic today of the economics behind what immigrants can provide to this country.
5.5% GDP growth. If we could achieve that.
Wendy?
10% visitor growth.
Edward?
Double-digit growth.
I don't know. I just want to send more kids to college.
Okay. Oh, well, okay, this makes it dreamers to you then.
Yeah.
Dreamers.
Oh, motivated.
The future.
Hi, Wendy.
Success.
Contribution.
I'll finish with this great one. This came from one of our panels, stupid.
The majority.
So your word was stupid?
Yes?
Non-existent.
Policy.
Alas.
Thank you all four. I enjoyed our conversation today. Appreciate it.
John?
You're great.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Another round for the panel, please. Thank you. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. And before we take a break, I want to ask you to join me in thanking the National Immigration Forum staff who have worked incredibly hard today. Thank you, staff. So we'll come back together in 10 minutes for our final panel about telling the story. Thank you.